we're laid into moderating this panel. This panel was actually supposed to be on African Unity Day, which is tomorrow. Unfortunately, oh well, there were too many topics, so we had to fit it into this day. There's a reason why I'm saying all this story. Um, the idea of looking at distribution from a Pan-African perspective, I think with everything that is going on in the industry now, it couldn't be more pertinent for us to start having these conversations about essentially what the black film ecosystem is. So this panel today is preempting the conversations around the theme of tomorrow, which is really about building a black Pan-African film and television ecosystem that allows not just Nigerian but African filmmakers to be able to monetize their work. So that's just laying the foundation for the topic. So I guess my first question, and it's to all panelists, we can just answer from right to left, is when you look at Pan-African, what comes to mind when you think about Pan-African distribution of television and film content?
Start. Hi everybody, it's a pleasure to be here, and thanks to Afriff for inviting me on this panel. Based on sort of my experience, I'm not a distributor, but I've worked obviously on platforms and actually consume and showcase the content. I think my message really, and it links to what you said about Pan-Africa, is I've always said, whenever I get a chance to get the microphone, is that Nollywood as an industry is not a country, meaning that Nollywood is a Pan-African asset and movement, something that we should all be proud of. We know that people all over Africa watch Nigerian film, watch Nollywood. But I think the question is, when it comes to distribution, when it comes to starting with the cinema and box office, it's still geographically sort of like enclosed. It's still only in West Africa, and that's even I'm being extreme when I say West Africa, is mainly Nigeria. I think one of the things is to kind of understand, some of those barriers and things that filmmakers need to know. When you're creating content, your terrain is actually not Nigeria. Your terrain is Africa because it's Pan-African cinema. It's the biggest film industry in Africa that's local, that's owned, right? I think it's important that we actually start to think that way, because the business of film is getting very critical now. We don't have any freebies anymore. The platforms and opportunities that we thought we had a year ago, they're shrinking. And so that takes you, when it's Pan-African, it becomes very proudly African. That means that it should be international as well, which means that if anybody's looking for African cinema, then they shouldn't discount what we're doing here in Nollywood. But Nollywood is not about Nigerian film, it's Pan-African film. And I think Afriff is a testament to that, because people are coming from all over Africa, trying to collaborate. I think it's a big one. I don't want to steal the mic too much, but I think the other side of it is how do we make sure that the stories can travel, right? And what kind of stories are we telling, and what are we aware of what the mass audiences in global want to see, right? So authenticity is really key, and the kind of stories. And I think we're coming to a time where, with limited distribution and with the vying for you to be the one that people see, you have to really be careful and be deliberate about the stories you want to tell, because it's the eye of the needle. Only a few will go through, and then how does it project who we are, like as Nigerians? I have a lot more to say. I'm sure as we go along, we'll keep talking, but I'll let Ope, say some more.
Good afternoon, everyone, and great to be here. So, generally, my thoughts are that, obviously, in the last 1 or 2 years, we've gotten a lot of attention from the global streamers, and I think that maybe made us a bit lazy. Those opportunities are shrinking now, so it's important to start to look more inwards. The opportunities to expand and to release films across Africa has always been there, but it requires a bit more investment, actually significant more investment and marketing. We've distributed films to other countries, French-speaking Africa, South Africa, and usually those films don't make very little or no money, but there's good reason for that. Number one, there's dubbing sometimes, which is a major thing, and then you find out that French in one country and the dialect is different from another dialect, so there are multiple languages across Africa, so that's a major barrier. So it's not even just to say, oh, you're dubbing to French, it's like you're dubbing to different versions, in quotes, of French. And then Portuguese So I think that distribution now has to, I think where we are now, people as companies now start to think distribution even from the perspective of converting the films into multiple languages. I mean, that happens in Europe already. Hollywood releases a film, it's releases all across Europe in multiple languages across territories. It happens in India as well, in Tamil, in Hindi, different languages. I think that's the gap that we're really missing, and then also the marketing budget as well, because I think it's also easy to assume that everybody knows what you're doing, but that doesn't, that's never really the case. So there's that opportunity to expand, and I'm speaking specifically for cinema now, right, across Africa, with our releases, and even in Nigeria as well. There's no reason why you can't release films and adopt them to Hausa as well. It could create some affinity to those localities as well. The assumption that is only everybody has to watch it in English or whatever language you made the film is, I think, one of the major barriers. And then marketing is a major thing as well.
Yeah, just honored and excited to be here as always. Yeah, I think that Pan-African distribution is really one of the things that first drew me to Nigeria and to, I think, African film distribution in general. One of my first jobs in the film industry was working in international film sales, and the way that even US films or Hollywood films are distributed on the continent is still in a very strange way that I think doesn't line up with kind of modern realities. And I think there's a lot of space for some exciting innovation in Pan-African distribution. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. So I'm as excited as everyone in this room to kind of see what comes and to learn more also.
Thank you. So I just want to go a little bit deeper. I've dealt with everybody here in one capacity or the other. So I want to go a little bit deeper in this comment about there are no more freebies anymore, because I think people don't realize that the distributors and they know, and those who are working with the platforms know that we really have hit a wall. So I really want us to dive into the conversation about what does there are no more freebies. What has happened in our relationship with the streamers right now? What has happened?
Okay, so I'm not sure if the question is right in terms of what happened with our relationship. I think for me, I think it's more the case of the economics of it. But there are different theories, right? But I think at the end of the day, what has happened is that it's very easy to misjudge Nigeria as a country. Imagine someone sits in a room and says there are 200 million people in this country, and if this percentage does this, and then we have this and all that. And sometimes it's not that straightforward, because there's purchasing power, there's access, people who can, payment systems, which is a major issue. And while sometimes you think everybody has a bank account and a card and all of that, to be able to pay, there's quite a number of people that don't have those things. So there are many challenges that that could actually limit the addressable markets. So usually the addressable market is not that the market isn't there. The market is there, but then there are peculiar challenges that I think that a lot of those peculiar challenges will be solved by us, not by the streamers or by the international companies, because we know the challenges. So I think that in terms of the economics, my theory is that perhaps the size of the opportunity is not as big as it was once perceived. And while I don't think that it's a total shutdown, I think it's just what they will call a right sizing of the opportunity. So because again, depending on how you're judging the market, are you judging the market based on local subscribers or based on the global opportunity? I think that most of the streamers like to look at it from the local perspective to say how many subscribers can we get in here and how can this add to our business as a whole. So when you look at it in that context, the addressable market is not as big as it seems, and probably growing, but growing at a very slow pace. And then when you add the fact that the naira has been devalued by significantly over the last 1 or 2 years, whatever income they were earning before is automatically reduced like 30 or 40%. So it creates a bit of an economic challenge. I think that's that's at the heart of it.
And then, so thanks for that. Because I think on the other side, what does then that mean? What does then does that then mean for filmmakers, all of us who who are doing the Lord's work? I think it means that we have to get a little bit more smarter in the way that we make the films and the stories we're telling and the costs that we're spending, because I said something just when I was doing the intro, it's like the eye of the needle. So there's going to be, particularly for a few titles, to still get on platforms, because it's not completely, it's shrinking. And if you want your story or your movie or your series or your film or your work to see the light of day, then it's going to have to be profitable and an investment, benefit to whoever you're trying to get that content to, which means that we can no longer just, I've got $1 million to do a film, it's already been paid for. I don't need to worry about who's going to watch it. I don't need to think about the story or the target audience, or who, I just do it and then it's already been paid for. It's not paid for. We're going to go back to where this trajectory was before we had all the opportunity and all these different platforms. I'm doing this, I know who I'm targeting, this is the story I'm telling, this is how I want this story to be, this is the market I'm trying to address. And therefore, you're spending the barest minimum relatively to what you're producing, so that you can make the returns and make your investors aware happy, so they can keep funding, right? If we don't have that cycle of investment yielding to profit, to more investment, then the industry will only grow at a much slower pace. And I think Nigerians are strong, Africans are strong, we're resilient. It's just time to kind of regroup, think about it, and collaborate a bit more. Not every single person, you don't need to do the movie by myself. I think if people have great ideas, communication, how to keep costs down, who to work with, collaboration, it will help. And also, collaboration across borders. I think I just mentioned about diaspora. I think we say it a lot, but I think unfortunately we don't have the data sets to actually confirm. But from where I sit and where I've sat, I know that African content is consumed in diaspora, to a high degree. There's no measurements for me to be able to say an actual number, but my instincts and my experience and the signs I've seen on the wall tell me that. What it means though is that we have to now be a little bit more deliberate about putting some things in place to measure, to be able to assess, because when an investor is investing, then they need to be able to see something that makes them say this, right? But the other part of it is that when we're creating content for Africa, we need to always bear in mind that the global audience is your playing field. Not only are Africans all over diaspora, they're African lovers of African content in diaspora who are really hungry for a good piece of content, a good story. And that story doesn't have to look like their own. That story has to look like our own and make us proud enough to keep telling those stories. So I think it's kind of like, two sides of the business. There's the filmmakers and there's the platforms who are being very deliberate and prudent about what they select, because they want it to work. If you want to stick out, then you have to be sure that what you're creating is going to work, so that those platforms who are restricting their focus can still at least say, this and this works, so I'm going to stick with these two, because it's going to be that survival of the fittest. That's what it's going to be until we get enough to create more attraction to bring them back, because they came, they saw something, right? And that's kind of like my message, is that they saw something. It's still there, it hasn't gone. It needs to be defined, regroup, so that we can keep seeing this thing and come back.
Listen, just a tweak for you to answer that question is, the contraction is not just a Nigerian or African problem, right? I would love for you to speak to the experience in North America in terms of the contraction, the withdrawal with the platforms and whatnot, and how North America is reacting to that, and what the African opportunity potentially is with that response.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things is I've studied a lot of, I've been watching the behavior of a lot of these streamers, these globally positioned streamers over the past several years, is because they are global companies, a lot of times if you just view their behavior in an individual country, it often seems kind of erratic or inconsistent. But it's part of kind of a global perspective or global objective. I mean, people talk about Amazon in conversation as a streaming platform and as a place to buy films, and obviously that's how I refer to them a lot of times, but they are also a shipper of consumer goods. They also control most of the servers that host most of the internet, and that is a huge, 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 so much bigger part of their business. So they're often acting according to other objectives that have nothing to do with film or us. So it is interesting. I think to some degree, yeah, there has been in North America also a contraction or a realignment of priorities. There's a lot of shifting in the market. I think people are trying to figure it out. I think the real opportunity for a lot of African filmmakers is not just the local for local and making local films for distribution locally, but kind of, as was already discussed, really local for global and really reaching global audiences that would want to see it. And also due to the fact that the price point of production here, what can be achieved for the budget is incredible. And as I've said several times when people ask me, or have asked me over the years why I keep coming here, you know, every year I think people will talk about the quality of Nigerian films and African films just getting stronger and stronger. And you see this, and you see more and more of them at global festivals, and it's really exciting.
Thank you so much. So now we've sort of dissected, we've stated this is our perspective or our point of view of how we consider Pan-Africanism in terms of film distribution. This is the present challenge. What are your thoughts around how we can creatively navigate the opportunity? Just listening to what Christopher is saying, and also based on my experience, what I'm seeing, there is this opportunity now because the market is fractured around the world. I mean, I don't know what's going on in Bollywood. They seem to be okay because they have like 1.2 billion people, right? but it seems like you know, North America, UK, Nigeria, the rest of us are sort of trying to figure out what this new business model is going to be. And in all of that, one thing is sure, everyone needs to be able to produce films in the most cost-efficient way possible without compromising on quality. So what are your thoughts around how we can creatively navigate this to be able to derive the benefits of the new opportunity and potentially be an alternative business model that could be successful, and some of the things we need to do to be positioned as Africans to do that?
I mean, I think you made reference to Bollywood, and I think that's a very good reference, a very strong reference. One of the things that we have to do more is be local, you know, and we have to build a self-sufficient industry. The good news is this year cinemas have, you know, so over the years there's been a decline in admissions, even though there's been growth in box office driven by increased ticket prices. But this year admissions are flat and likely to end at about a 3 to 5% increase in admissions. So that's a good thing, and a lot of that is driven by, you know, the local Nollywood, you know, because Hollywood has been a bit inconsistent as well over the last few years, even though I think next year is a strong year generally for Hollywood. But I think it's important to continue to look local. I think that, you know, there's going to be a lot of attention on cinemas going forward. I also think that collaboration, like Wangi said, is extremely important. And again, you know, people are going to have to find ways to shoot at, you know, even though our budgets are already low, we're going to have to find ways to shoot at even lower budgets. You know, otherwise you're not going to be able to make the next film. So I think that we need to generally look inwards more. I think that it's time for, you know, maybe another local streaming platform as well. I think there's a possibility for that. I don't know who's going to bail the cat. I don't know who's going to go because it's a really expensive thing. But I think that these are possible opportunities, and I think that when there's, you know, times of crisis like this, it's time to really rethink the entire business model. And you know, again, like I said initially, expanding across Africa, releasing films across Africa is a major opportunity. I'm aware that YouTube is also doing ridiculous numbers, you know, so that's another opportunity that people are, you know, taking advantage of. But I mean, you have to be able to shoot at now in minute budgets to be able to break even or make money. So I guess I think it's just a good time for everyone to think back on how to remodel their business. But as Wanki said, the opportunity is still there. It is an opportunity, and we have to look for how to grow it.
Yeah, I think just to continue in that conversation, I think for me it's an appeal because I think the industry is there, it's ripe. We can see this shiny object, and it's just just short of reach. And I think we need support of the government or the parastatals or the people who we have creative industries now. There's a lot of buzz happening, and I know that they're doing work, but we're waiting to see what that outcome is. We've the sort of learning curve of how Hollywood came, right? Yes, it grew in spite of itself, right? But it has grown enough to become something that's a phenomenon that's noticeable, and it is so many things. Not only is it something that's sustainable in terms of job creation, it's something that creates revenue, it's something that helps project the image. It's such it seems like it's a no-brainer, but it's the thing we have that we can sell. So if it's the thing we have that we can sell, and we've now hit a point where we're pushed to the wall, I think the government, the parastatals that are set up to protect and to keep this thing going need to kind of see the opportunity and step in to support. I think even with the stories, the image of the United States or even the UK wasn't just built by some people who just came with it. It was strategic with the stories they told. So even if it's not the stories that Leo and I are creating, they're stories that we still need to tell, and it's up to those parastatals to make it possible, to do the connections, make the connections, for us to at least start the engine running again. Then we get the fuel. Then we can continue to do what we do best, because I think we have shown enough that we have the raw grit, which is, and we didn't wait. We're not waiting for handouts, right? We've shown. Now it's time for someone to say, this thing, it has grown so much. Now we want to, because we can see. So we need that. We need the measurements that help us understand what we're doing and why we are doing what, and what the next thing to do is, and why we should put money in A or not B. We need that. If we don't have that, we can't go to a credible investor who might be global, who doesn't have the same instincts for local like we do, because people will bank on, okay, yeah, you've had experience over 10 years, so you know the story to tell. That's, it's still a risk. Maybe a good informer, but it's still a risk. It'd be good to have standards in place, something in place that we can say there's data to support. And then maybe to the extent, I think I was speaking to you the other night, we're talking about, I think Isioma is actually working on something on her own as well, but like, is there, sort of like, the movies in Nollywood. In fact, when I was in Amazon, I had to work on something using desk research to kind of segment the movies, tier the movies, low, high, low is relative, up until, give it a name, give it an idea, say what I think the costs are. Like, I had to, find a way with desk research and everything to do that, to be able to even play in the market, because that's a structured company. They're not just going, why are we investing this amount in this movie? What are we expecting to get out of it? Why should we spend? What are the different segments? Beyond movies, there's reality, there's TV, there's music. So, they needed some structure, but because of the experience I had and the network and the connections, I was able to gather, pull, and then create something workable. But it was not, it wasn't a total, science. Some of it was instinctive. So I feel like there's some support is needed, because, I might be harsh when I'm saying it, but there's a little bit of a wound and there's bleeding, but it can be stopped if we just, realize the value and the potential that is the film industry for Africa. Know that we are not a country, and that we are a global movement, and we are African giants, and be seen to everybody out there who's just, trying. Don't give up. Like Okwe said, and we're talking about it. We literally have to make a mark, because I really, really believe that we're building it and they will come. But we really need the government and structures to support us.
Yeah, I would say, first of all, that's incredible to me that people are able to break even distributing a film solely on YouTube. That is a thing that I don't think there's a lot of visibility outside the United States into is how many independent, small movies are made in the United States that never make any money, where everyone loses money. They cost a significant amount more than you would spend here maybe on a small independent film, but they're definitely not able to break even on YouTube. And if you look at, as far as kind of lessons learned or things that indie film in the United States has done, a lot of people have noticed a trend and a shift towards just a lot of horror films or thrillers or kind of genre type films being produced over the past few years. But that's not necessarily a taste thing so much as it's a realization that a lot of these films can be produced for very little money. You know, if you look at something like the classic example everybody tried to recreate, Paranormal Activity, you look at something like that and just the things they did, a lot of in-camera tricks, a lot of stuff that was not very expensive in one house, very clever. You know, there was an indie film several years ago that I was looking at when I was in acquisitions, and it was at, I want to say it was at South by Southwest. The filmmaker made the mistake of, during the Q&A at the end of the show, of saying his production budget out loud, which he said was $20,000, which was just incredibly low for a film that was at South by Southwest. I offered the sales agent $30,000 because I said, haha, you told me the budget. You told everybody the budget. That's what I'm going to offer. The sales agent told me to take a hike, and we were friends. And I'm pretty sure he probably sold it in the range of $50,000, right? So assuming that maybe that filmmaker was underselling their budget, maybe there was actually some in-kind services they got or some help with post-production or something, maybe their budget was actually 30 or maybe even 40,000, right? But they still probably got an offer for around 50 to 60,000, and they were able to actually make a profit on an independent film that also got into a festival. And they really did that by sticking in a genre and sticking in a space that they knew they could execute for a budget. They didn't try and make something in space or, you know, a big action film. They really stuck within something that they could tell a really compelling story and have a game for festival competition. So anyway.
Thank you. One last question before we open up for the audience. And yes, we were talking about, so I'm hearing you on support that you need from the government, which is basically saying we need an enabling environment. And as much as I'm in so much pain for the industry, I'm also glad that we're going through what we're going through now, because I can, I'll tell you why. And I'm not a sadist. I'll tell you why. I mean, I've been coming to Afriff for many years. I started my journey in Afriff during, I don't know how many people ever attended my legal master classes where I started teaching people about chain of title and all these things. And, you know, we were sort of the first set of people to ever do that. And I remember one session we did on insurance. And everybody, we brought an insurance company, we had trained them, they had capacity, and nobody bought that policy for 1 year. And so they shut it down until Netflix and Amazon came into the market and started to demand for the product. There's a reason I'm going somewhere. A lot of what you're talking about now, a lot of people, we've been having these conversations about the enabling environment that we need. We need to get structured. We need to have standardized contracts. We need to have certainty of cost. We've been talking about it, but no one did anything about it when there was all this free money, right? Everybody was focused on, whatever, man, I'm just going to get my money, say my budget is this, and get it, because these platforms, what do they know? And now that is done, that's gone, and we have to now deal with ourselves. So I'm happy that we are now in a situation where it's sink or swim. And I know that we're going to swim and we're going to survive. And we're going to do the things that we need to do so that, like you said, we're self-sufficient, we're sustainable, because this is a sustainability issue, fundamentally. And so my question is, what are those things that you need, one, the government to do specifically to enable this Pan-African distribution, or even enable this idea of local, sustainable? Two, what do you think that we need to do as practitioners within the space? You see how I've gone from lawyer to practitioner. I really I now think mentally like I'm a filmmaker. But what do you think that filmmakers, distributors, cinema chain owners, what, even those working in the platforms for this market, what are those things that we need to start doing in terms of our practices that could save us in this time of crisis? Well, I'd say you go first because you tackled me when I said I was somewhat glad.
Yeah, because I don't know what you're glad about. Well, I think what can the government do? I think low-cost funding is a major. I'm actually almost tired of saying it because we say it all the time. And while the government will say that the funds are available, but then you need to get a bank guarantee or you need to get collateral, and how many filmmakers are able to access, that, and then it goes through a commercial bank that gives you a list of 300 items to go and bring that you know you will never bring. So there's this funding that even industry that 95% of the industry cannot access. And that's, for me, that's a major thing. And I'm saying industry, cinema owners, producers, equipment owners, across the entire value chain. So I think funding is a major issue because, again, if we have more infrastructure, even physical infrastructure and more cinemas and more outlets, it will be, the monetization of content will be a lot easier. So for me, that's a low-hanging fruit. And the funding is available. It's just the structure to access it that is, that's the major thing.
I think she asked one more question, distribution, but yes, practitioners. But let me just say my piece and just what you said. I think there's this conversation that's having the other day around sort of making it easy for films to be produced here, even if it's across, why aren't people coming not to Nigeria to shoot, which will generate its own revenue from the back of the scenes, for example. Is it the incentives, is it tax incentives, is it the things, whatever it is, because I think, like you said, there's a lot that's happening here. You're amazed that things are being produced certain quality, whatever. So there's talent, right? There's capability. There's all those things. There's raw passion to do it, right? And so there's things that the government can do to enable people to look at the talent that's here, the locations that's here, and showcase part of what we do. Because I think that's, in a converse way, it still comes back around to generating revenue and getting a base that we can kind of lift off from. Even when I was talking about cinemas, and it's not like we're looking for an IMAX everywhere. It's not that we're looking for somewhere like this everywhere. Right? In the a long time ago, let's give my age away. People used to watch outdoor cinema. If you go to the north, they're watching Bollywood, they're sitting out and watching, right? So it's maybe viewing centers is a better way to say it, so that they see that we're not asking for too much. But I think there's opportunity because what YouTube is telling us is that definitely people want to watch content that looks like them, that speaks like them. YouTube is only as far as it can be because data penetration is still not where it can be, right? And I think that's one of the reasons why I think the first question you asked about, the blockers. Penetration is not as, mobile phone data, it's good, but considering the population, it can be a lot more to even access your films on even YouTube. But there is hinterland, suburbs and places, villages, where people are hungry just to see, for escapism, just to see people that look like them, to get something different. And we don't have that. And we're not asking, I don't think it's too much of an ask relative to what the benefit will be. So I'm just adding to what I said.
Christopher,
I think,
can you look at this from a sort of international perspective as well?
sure, yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting. As an American, we don't have a lot of kind of European level government support for films. We have certain state tax breaks. We obviously have a lot of production facilities and a lot of things that were built in Hollywood over an extended period of time. I think the interesting thing is I could sit and probably brainstorm with a bunch of other Americans, maybe some Europeans, and we could talk about all the things that have worked in different countries that we've seen. But in terms of what I think the solutions are going to be, I think all of them are going to come from here. I think to some degree, the innovation and just the incredible ability to get things done in spite of lack of government support, in spite of lack of certain film infrastructure, in spite of so many things, the industry just persists and it keeps growing and it keeps doing things. So I think, honestly, from my perspective, I don't necessarily have suggestions because I feel like I just come here and I learn so much just by watching what's happening. And I think that honestly, a lot of people in the West could learn a lot from just watching how various problems have been overcome here. Because to some degree, as you spoke about earlier, those problems of contraction and how to make an independent film successful, how to work within a tight budget, how to tell a good story, those are global problems also. So anyway.
Thank you. So I guess you're saying we should trust our instincts. I think that's a good way to end the discussion with the panelists. But I'll open it up for any questions, please. Where's the roaming mic? Questions, please just raise your hand and the mic will be given to you. Okay, I think that's Emmanuel. Oh no, sorry. There's a guy there. Okay.
Hi, thanks for that. So, now I like what Wanki said regarding the viewing centers. I know that the federal government has issued a waiver on some level of licensing fees for viewing centers. I know that in India, India has often pursued a hybrid model. So basically, on one, they have the multiplexes like this, and on the other hand, because like us, they have a lot of people. However, they have a vast socio-economic makeup in their country, just like us. So the question I'm asking is I know there's been a lot of conversation on viewing centers or community seminars or only Nollywood viewing cinemas, however you want to call it. So the question I want to ask is that a feasible solution going forward in Nigeria? Has anybody tested it? Does anybody know? Is there a pilot program going on? That's just what, because I see it online a lot. I see a lot of conversation online. However, I want to know of its feasibility. If anybody has tested out its feasibility or is currently testing out its feasibility, and what's the feedback? Thanks.
Okay, I don't think anyone has tested it, but I think that we're at a point in the industry where we have enough local content to support a Nollywood-only cinema. Now, you're obviously going to miss out on a lot of things. This year, for example, there's been Deadpool, there's Venom, there's Gladiators, there's all of that. So, so clearly limits your profitability, right? However, if you set up a cinema without what you call a DCP, DCI projector, which is significantly more expensive, then your startup cost is much lower, right? So, I don't think anyone has tested it. I know there are a number of people who are trying to test out the model, but I think that that's probably a way to expand people saying Nollywood even more. So I think it's definitely a solution that people are now seriously looking at. Because every month there's every month this year there's been a Nollywood film that's grossed over 100 million in the box office. So there's enough business for a community cinema that shows on Nollywood.
Please stand. Please stand if you want to.
Hello, good afternoon. So my name is Otito. I'm also a filmmaker and I'm a big fan of all of you on this stage. Based on the conversation, I wanted to just quickly, maybe we could touch on documentaries because I have a documentary currently I'm working on, and I was lucky enough to get an executive producer who loved the project and wanted to invest, and he's invested. So while we're working on it, we're already having conversations surrounding distribution, streaming platforms and stuff. And one of the things is me getting to research. I heard about Netflix you can't pitch to Netflix, they only use aggregators. I'm not sure how to even go and approach Amazon. I'm not sure it's there. So, and the conversation's happening right now, so it's film-centered. And if somebody told me, because even for African Magic, someone said, "Don't. Why are you wasting your time in documentaries? Nobody watches them in Nigeria." So, while we're having the conversations surrounding film, what's now the conversations to be had in terms of distribution of documentaries? I mean, Amazon had one that was very good with the Rainmakers this year. So, what's the conversation around that?
Well, I'm not sure if I should give you a very blunt answer. I'll try and be diplomatic, but sorry, blunt. Okay, the truth is that documentaries are very difficult to sell, purely from a distribution perspective. I'll probably sell 20 films before one documentary gets considered, and that's the truth. I think what I always advise is when you're making a film, what's really your objective? Is it to sell? Is it to make money? Are you just trying to make something to show, maybe a group of people? Is it a passion project? But if it's a commercial decision, documentaries are really not the way to go. I mean, there are people who make documentaries and able to show it to HNIs, politicians, and all of that, and maybe especially biopics and all of that, and then they get paid. That's another model. But streaming platforms, very difficult to sell documentaries, and that's just the truth, right? And then you can't even release in the cinemas either. So it's a bit of it's a tough one.
Let me just, we're here and I think all of us are learning. So for documentaries, if I was sitting in front of you in a meeting, I would be asking some questions about documentaries. So I think documentaries in loose terms, just a documentary, but you can make a movie that's based on, you can tweak, you can create. I'm just giving you like a cheat, for anybody here who's working on an idea or a documentary. Documentary, it is a message you're trying to send, there's something you're trying to highlight, right? Sometimes you can tell that same story, in a different way. The main thing that most platforms, whether it's a cinema house or a TV station or a channel or a digital platform, they want to entertain and they want to target a certain group of people. And usually it's, young adults, anywhere between the ages of, say, 16 to sort of 40 or 45, maybe 50. So you'll have to kind of have those pointers in mind to say, okay, this thing I'm doing, is it a talking head or is there another way I can do it where it's telling my story, it's highlighting what I want to highlight, but it's also engaging it like a movie would do, like a series. But I think there's the example I want to give is actually like Afriff is a film that was done. There's also a documentary that's been done about that same film, and I think the film actually had more traction than the actual documentary, but the same premise and the same highlight point they're trying to highlight. So sometimes it's not just to send you away and say documentary, it's almost like there's a way you can, documentary, and before you shoot, so you don't end up in a place, it's good to kind of chop the idea around and talk to people and see before you go and create something that kind of doesn't have, a home.
I would say, personally, one of the most successful ways I think I've seen documentaries, filmmakers go about it is really the festival route, because kind of as already discussed, they are incredibly hard to sell. Distributors often don't want to talk about them, they're not often looking for them, but if you kind of take I think a lot of times you can kind of reverse engineer a path by maybe looking at other documentaries that you think are comparable to maybe in subject matter or scale or what you're talking about. You can kind of see maybe where they ended up, what festivals they may have submitted to and got into. Because a lot of times, depending on the size of the festival, there are acquisitions people from different, maybe not the platform directly, but maybe one of these smaller aggregators. Like maybe that's a way that you can get more visibility on it, is through the festival route.
Thank you. Any more questions? There's a question at the back there. And just whilst we're waiting for the mic to get there, one documentary on Amazon I really like is the one on the Super Eagles. I think it's 96. Yeah, that was a really, really good documentary. And it was very well done.
The reason for that is because there was nostalgia involved. But you see, it wasn't just a documentary about football. And the reason why, you know, we keyed into it was because they were able to creatively talk about a time and a place in Nigeria, leveraging football. But what it did was reminded, for me, the reason why I keyed in that touch was it reminded us of who we are and who we can be, you know, despite what might be going on around us. And I'm happy you said that because people haven't really watched it and it's still in there to view. And it's actually something of pride because it was obviously homegrown, made well, and it celebrates football.
Please go and check out that documentary on Amazon. It's really good. And Rainmaker was also really, really good. I actually stumbled on them by accident. So it was really good documentaries. Yes.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. So commendable is the fact that yes, we are seeing more distribution pan-Africanly. However, I would like to ask the panelists themselves, in reality of, well, where Yemi had mentioned that yes, admissions might end on a flat note, but then in reality of the fact that our economic crimes at the moment have cut short what would have been our normal spend on cinema distribution, the lifespan of these movies in the cinema we can see are then consistently getting cut short, that there is no incentive to then go to the cinema. And then before we say, oh, streaming, there is the prevailing, I should call it cankerworm of piracy that is consistently in this sector. What do you see as the viable, or should I say the future of distribution the Pan-African way, cutting across cinema, TV, and streaming itself? I'd like to ask you.
I think our question is, I think your question is the final topic, but maybe let me help her a little. I think what she's trying to say is, yes, we know that there's the economic downturn, and every sector of every country and every sector is affected, which includes the film industry. But if we have agreed on this panel that a Pan-African approach is a potential way out, what exactly is that approach? She seems to think that we've not particularly spelled it out clearly in the panel.
I mean, I'm not sure there's, well, as things are today, I'm not sure that there's a change in the routes to monetization. It's still largely going to be go to cinemas first, particularly for big films, though. There are films that will go to, and there are various platforms. So again, it's a very broad conversation. Probably a bit more context, but since you spoke about cinemas, I think that cinema still continues to be a very viable platform. I think that you're correct that sometimes when the films don't do well, then the time is cut short. But I think that that's also a function of how well the film is doing. We have a film in cinema that is in the 7th week now, and it's still going strong. So films will go anywhere between 2 weeks to 10 weeks, depending on, again, how well the film is doing, and how, if the cinema feels that they're still making money from the films. So there's those business decisions that each cinema has to make, regarding films. And afterwards, piracy is a problem. However, what we can say for a fact is that during the cinema window, there's probably been only 1 or 2 reported cases of piracy, during the cinema window, and not from cinema. Right? So generally, the cinema window is generally safe. Usually what happens is maybe in the course of handling the content, or when it gets on streaming, then it becomes a little more easy to compromise. But generally speaking, the path is the path. We haven't figured out a new path, but right now that's usually the path, and is to try and max it out. Obviously, there are other platforms like airlines and other platforms that you can monetize content from outside of cinema or streaming, and then there's TVOD and all sorts. But really, I think the key is trying to max out the lifetime of the film across various platforms.
Okay, I think let me add to that. I think now more than ever, Nigeria needs to sign more co-production deals so that you can have, and not just Nigeria, but as many African countries with themselves and outside of the world, so that our productions have national status in as many places as possible. So, because if I'm looking at the issue of distribution, the first thing is access. And if my film is considered a South African film, a Kenyan film, a Brazilian film, an Indian film, a British film. It's a whole different conversation. I'm already in there. And I think that is then becomes a route to market for the content to travel. And again, we can't go as individuals. And there's some, I think I'm seeing with Uprising now, they're doing, cinema run in multiple countries, which is great, but there's still 1 or 2 cinemas here and there. We're going to see what the returns are at the end of the day. But that's a country-to-country conversation that must be led by the government, with the industry paying attention and keying into that interaction. I also think that we may need to, at this stage, to survive, become more of service providers and really start looking at production servicing as an option here in Africa. For the very reason that we have been able to hack producing cheap, and year on year, like Christopher says, the quality has gone up. So Nigeria and Africa has to become an attractive place, because remember, this constraint is not unique. It's happening in Hollywood, for example. So right now, a lot of people in Hollywood are saying, where is the cheapest place I can produce content? Because it's too expensive in America. That becomes, I think, a good example of that. Canada is one country that has benefited so well from production servicing. They have a super dynamic film industry in Canada, you'll be surprised. But I don't know how many times have you seen a Canadian film? They're very boring people. Love you, my Canadians. Love you guys. But they're not as exciting and as interesting as Americans. So even if they made their own film, are you gonna watch a Canadian film, right? However, they're like, well, we're right beside the US. We have places that can be double gangers for New York, Chicago, and they're constantly shooting in Canada. They have a very, very vibrant industry because all they do is be a cheap place for Americans to shoot. There is no reason why we can't do that in Nigeria with the right environment to do it. And then on top, Nigerians are interesting people. So you're winning on both sides. You can create your content that people want to see, and you can also create content for cheap for other people, for other markets. So I think that that's also another thing about route to market that we should be thinking about. And in fact, if Nigeria gets too expensive, we're looking at AFCFTA, for example, we as Nigerians should be able to go to other African countries and shoot for even cheaper with our stories, potentially. So this is what I think, this is how we need to start thinking. We need to take ownership of the fact that on the continent, we are the leaders and do what leaders do. Go out and clean the forest and build what we want to see. Sorry, questions? More questions? Are there any more questions? All right, in the absence of more questions, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do any of the panelists want to just give one last word before we round up? We have 2 minutes. Closing remarks.
Keep making films.
We leave on an optimistic note. Thank you so much. You guys have been so engaging. Thank you to panelists.